Good morning. I count it a great joy and privilege to be among you once again, to be among you on this particular Sunday when we from the Pacific Southwest Mennonite Conference extend to all of you a hearty welcome to this part of God's family. I'm grateful to be joined by several representatives from the Pacific Southwest Mennonite Conference, and we together thank you for the warm welcomes we have already received. At the special delegate business meeting of the Pacific Southwest, where an overwhelming majority voted to welcome Willow Avenue Mennonite Church as part of us, Tim Otto, whose permission I have to share these remarks, said, I quote, "To welcome one another is in accordance with the scriptures. Christians are not a group of people who perfectly agree and try to force others into agreeing with them, but rather a group of people who can disagree over important issues and yet live in love and unity with one another." Remarks such as these, of which there were many in our business meeting, influenced the ultimate vote. They also reflected the interpretive lens of the majority of the delegates who share an unwavering belief that an essential character of the God of the Bible is that of inclusion rather than exclusion. My friends, God is a welcoming God. We know this from God's presence embodied among us in the person of Jesus, whom we celebrated this past Advent. In Jesus, God always welcomed everyone he encountered. When his disciples sought to limit who could have access to him, whether children, tax collectors, marginalized persons, persons of ill repute, Jesus always rebuked their failure to understand the heart of God. Politicians and church leaders who try to set a small table ignore the fact that Jesus always made it bigger, as does the Bible. The biblical story is an ever-increasing inclusiveness. It begins with the marriage of a Moabite woman to an Israelite man in Ruth. It continues with God's intent in the temple, that the temple will be a house of prayer for all nations. Begins to be realized when Peter and Paul welcome non-Jews into the Christian movement. Their action is grounded in the instruction of Jesus in Luke that repentance and faith and forgiveness is to be proclaimed to all nations. According to the Bible, whenever humans create a closed, exclusive system, God always broke it open and let new people in. God's purpose and God's invitation to us is to include and embrace whomever seeks access, even imploring those whose conception of the divine saw them fleeing God. If Jesus is our example, it isn't merely misguided, but even obscene when we create obstacles or roadblocks that preclude anyone from being included in the generous and loving embrace of God. God's posture, as Jesus shows over and over again, is one of welcome to all humanity. Jesus welcomes the crowd. In particular, he welcomes sinners, which nauseated the Pharisees. This fellow, they said, welcomes sinners and eats with them. How can he open himself to such people? They gossiped. The story of Jesus tells, in response to their gossiping, about a father who, against all odds, offers the unexpected and undeserved welcome to his son. Indeed, I think if we took Jesus seriously, we would understand that the very heart of our mission must be understood as the church offering welcome and kinship to all people everywhere. All are welcomed to be a part of God's family. We should never be reticent or even apologetic about welcoming others. Archbishop Desmond Tutu suggests that offering welcome is not an appended expectation inherent to our discipleship as we follow Jesus. It is, in actual fact, says Tutu, the essence of our being as Christians. I quote, he said, "We are made for goodness. We are made for love. We are made for friendliness. We are made for togetherness. We are made for all the beautiful things that you and I know. We are made to tell the world there are no outsiders. All are welcome. Black, white, red, rich, poor, educated, not educated, male, female, gay, straight, all, we all belong to this family, this human family, God's family." End of quote. In alluding to the welcoming character of God, Tutu echoes the articulation of Apostle Paul, who in Galatians 3:28 offered this truth: "There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male or female, for you have all been made one in Jesus Christ." Paul writes this truth to the Galatian church in a context where the cultural norm was to draw impermeable lines between them and us. This practice made it unthinkable, even distasteful, to welcome people different from themselves, Greeks, slaves, women. Such socializing was taboo and off limits, much like it is in many parts of our world today. It is easy to welcome people like us. Jesus suggests, however, that if we were inclined to only welcome people like us, we are outside of the purpose of God. Matthew 5, verse 46, Jesus said, "If you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same?" Jesus makes it as clear as he can that we are to welcome everyone without exception, not just fellow members of our tribe, not even just Christians. Jesus confirms that it's easy to welcome those like us, but that it is a repudiation of our discipleship if we stopped there. Jesus explicitly disavows this as poor discipleship. We are challenged to welcome also those who have nothing in common with us, those who precisely are different than we ourselves. The whole witness of the New Testament underscores this posture as a defining characteristic of the new movement that came to be called Christian. This verse is a powerful and poignant reminder that the intent of God and the character of the Christian movement is that none is to be ignored or excluded. God in Jesus hails the humanity, the dignity, and the worth of every person, and our task in the church and through the church is to uncover that truth and embody God's welcome and embrace of all people. A favorite piece of art for me is the Return of the Prodigal Son. It is one of the most insightful and significant oil paintings by Rembrandt van Rijn. It is among the Dutch master's final works completed in the 2 years before his death in 1669. The painting depicts the moment when an alienated son returns to his father. The art historian Kenneth Clark describes the renowned work as a picture which those who have seen the original in St. Petersburg, Russia, may be forgiven for claiming that it is the greatest picture ever painted. Rembrandt's play on light and shadow tell a story that highlights the power of boundless parental love, mercy, and compassion, as contrasted with the self-condemnation of the younger alienated son and the denunciation by the older son, who is focused on his own self-deserving reward. One of the powerful messages conveyed by Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son is the meaning of God's regard for our humanity and the worth of each person. Instead of further alienating his younger son, the father shows mercy on him, gives thanks for his safe return, and welcomes him home as a son without sanction or condition. No need for self-abasement or self-deprecation. No need for self-justification. There is only space for a profuse and prodigious welcome, accompanied by a season of extravagant and even to some reckless generosity. A fine robe, a ring for his finger, sandals for his feet, and the slaughter of a fattened calf for the celebratory meal. Some scholars, along with Nielsen Warshaw, depict the father celebrating his son and hurries to meet him before the door with utmost fatherly love. While his neighbors counseled the father about the gravity of his son's violation and encouraged him to write off this son and disown him, we can imagine the father at the end of each day's work sitting on the veranda, looking out to the horizon and praying earnestly for the return of his son. And then one day, in the shimmering haze of the desert light, he sees an apparition coming toward him. He knows, as only a father can, that this is his son. And rather than rehearsing recriminations that he will speak in order to help his son understand the gravity of the violation, the father gathers up his robes and runs as fast as his feet will carry him and falls on his son's shoulders, picks him up and carries him home. According to Nicholas Sutho, the prodigal son interprets the father's unconditional love as a subject we might consider. And I would like to suggest to you, at the risk of being critiqued severely, that I think the story that we call the prodigal son is coincidental. That this story has really little to do with prodigality. It has everything to do with the character of a welcoming, loving, embracing God. I've heard many sermons, including some that I preached, that spoke about the need to return from our prodigal wanderings, to be converted back to God. And that's a valid interpretation of God's desire for us. But this particular story is really about the generous nature of a loving, welcoming God. And so the conversion that's invited here is not a conversion from us back to God. It's a conversion that allows us to be the instruments of expressing God's love and tender mercy, of God's generous embrace and welcome. We need to be converted to become those who welcome others. It's noteworthy that Jesus, in reflecting on the judgment, underscores the vital importance of welcoming. In Matthew 25, verse 35 following, Jesus said, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Jesus suggests that a key criterion of judgment is how we respond to those we initially deem it hard to welcome: the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, and those whom we just deem deserving of punishment or segregation from society, or indeed anyone we consider different. The character of the welcome that we provide for those we perceive as atypical is not just a reflection on Christianity as a whole, but it is a direct reflection of what we think about Jesus. The Bible is peppered with a plethora of verses about welcoming others. Indeed, throughout the entire Bible, embedded in thousands of stories, is a singular account of how God welcomes all of humanity. And so we in the Pacific Southwest Mennonite Conference are pleased and honored to join you on this journey of being a welcoming community. We thank you for the years of discernment as you again and again confirmed that the character of God and the mark of the people of God is to be a welcoming people. We do not regard our welcome to WMC as an act of particular virtue or kindness. It is a fitting expression of our Christian confession, besides which it would be short-sighted if we missed the promise of shared fellowship and the gifts that this congregation has to offer to our community as we together seek to be faithful in following Jesus. In the context of rich diversity as well as differentness in our convictions, the PSMC embraces a commitment to forbearance. So we welcome you, not into a community built on expectations of conformity, but into a community which anticipates that your history and context will be different than that of some of us. We also presume that in a spirit of goodwill and Christian unity, we will engage each other in constructive conversations that will enrich and expand our faithfulness to God. Audrey Arthur Lynn. The implication of this welcome by God, of which our welcome can only be a feeble semblance, is also an invitation to each of you to bring whom you are, your disparate gifts and capacities, to the privileges and challenges of ministry among this people of God. We are blessed to welcome your leadership and gifts, not just in the life of this congregation, but throughout the Pacific Southwest Mennonite Conference and the Mennonite Church USA. We welcome you.